Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we tackling today?
Well, this one's pretty thought-provoking. We're going to be digging into this concept of the yoke of control. It's from an episode of the Discerning Truth podcast.
Hosted by Adam Repley, right?
That's the one.
Yeah.
He really dives into some interesting topics. This particular episode focuses on how religions have used unproven claims to, well, kind of control people's lives, their decisions, all that.
Sounds intense.
It is, but it's also super fascinating and kind of unsettling if you really think about it. This episode basically argues that this yoke of control is still very much a thing today.
Interesting. So where do we even begin with something like that?
The podcast starts off by painting a pretty bleak picture, the state of the world, wars, terrorism, environmental disasters, all that. And it makes the point that this isn't just some far-off problem. It affects everyone, no matter what you believe or where you live.
Right. Those are global issues. No one's immune to that.
Exactly. But then it gets even more interesting. The episode argues that despite these shared challenges, we're still massively divided by our beliefs. And not just like, oh, I prefer this political party kind of differences, but deeper fundamental beliefs about the world and our place in it.
So that's where this yoke of control comes in.
Exactly. It's like we're all in this sinking ship together, but instead of working together to fix it, we're arguing about whose beliefs are right and who has the right to steer.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful analogy. Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah. But okay, let's back up a bit. What exactly are these unproven claims the podcast keeps referring to? And how have they been used to control people throughout history?
Well, think about it. For centuries, religions have used promises of an afterlife, divine rewards, or even eternal punishment to influence how people behave. These claims, without any real evidence to back them up, have shaped entire societies and even led to conflict between different groups.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, think about the Crusades or the Salem witch trials. Those were both driven by deeply held religious beliefs, and the results were, well, pretty devastating.
Exactly. And those are just a couple of examples. Throughout history, these kinds of unproven claims have been used to justify everything from war and persecution to social hierarchies and political systems. It's like, once you convince people that your beliefs are the only true ones and that those who don't agree are going to be punished in some way, you have an incredibly powerful tool for control.
It's kind of scary when you think about it that way. And what's even more unsettling is that this kind of thinking is still very much alive today.
Oh, absolutely. Just look at how certain beliefs are used to justify discrimination, intolerance, and even violence in some parts of the world. It's like we haven't really learned from the mistakes of the past.
No, it seems like we haven't. So what's the solution then? How do we break free from this yoke of control? Because the podcast doesn't just leave us hanging with this doom and gloom. It actually offers some hope.
Right. And it all comes down to that third tenet of the philosophy of the divine law. Seek and accept the truth no matter where you find it. It's about thinking critically, examining the evidence, and being willing to question what we've always taken for granted, even if, and maybe especially if, it challenges our deepest beliefs.
Yeah, I remember that part. It's like instead of clinging to beliefs that might be based on fear or tradition, we should be actively seeking out truth wherever it may lead us.
Exactly. And that's a pretty radical idea, especially in today's world where it feels like everyone's got an agenda. But the podcast argues that this is the only way to truly break free from this yoke of control. It's about taking responsibility for our own beliefs and actions rather than blindly following the crowd or accepting things just because that's how they've always been.
It's like we have to become our own truth seekers, right? Instead of relying on others to tell us what to think or believe. And this ties into another really interesting point that the podcast makes.
Let me guess. Humankind is not exempt from extinction.
That's the one. It's pretty sobering, right? Like, it really drives home the point that these aren't just abstract philosophical debates. Our choices, our beliefs, they have real-world consequences. And those consequences could be pretty dire if we're not careful.
Absolutely. The episode argues that if we continue to blindly follow beliefs that aren't supported by evidence or that lead us down a path of destruction, we're essentially setting ourselves up for failure. And that failure could ultimately mean the end of our species.
Yeah, not exactly a cheery thought. But that's why this whole idea of seeking and accepting truth is so important, right? It's not just about feeling good or being right. It's about our survival.
Exactly. It's about making informed choices that are based on reality, not on wishful thinking or dogma. And that's where true salvation lies, according to the podcast. Not in some far-off afterlife, but in the ability to create a better world for ourselves and future generations, right here, right now.
So, to sum it all up, We've been talking about this yoke of control, how unproven claims have been used to control people throughout history, and how that same dynamic is still playing out today. But the good news is there's a way to break free.
And that way is through seeking and accepting truth, no matter how uncomfortable or challenging it may be. It's about thinking for ourselves, questioning what we've been told, and being willing to change our minds when presented with new evidence.
And that's what I want to leave you with today. What beliefs are you holding on to that might need a closer look? What truths are you avoiding because they're too scary or inconvenient? These are tough questions, but they're worth asking.
They really are, because ultimately the truth will set you free. And who knows, it might just save us all in the process.
If you're interested in learning more about this whole yoke of control concept and how to break free from it, I highly recommend checking out the Discerning Truth podcast. You can find it on the beyondtherituals.com website or on any major podcast platform. It's definitely worth a listen. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.